This is Blaze Ridden, and you're listening to Pro Lacrosse Talk.
On Schreiber. Sidearm whip, scores! Now in front, Pll scores! Hands off for Rabel, switches hands and scores!
Kylie O'Miller showing off those shifty skills.
Right off the bat, there's Lyle Thompson!
Welcome to Pro Lacrosse Talk, the voice of Pro Lacrosse. I'm Hutton, he's Adam. Together we're bringing you interviews with your favorite players and coaches, as well as news from all 4 professional lacrosse leagues.
Big news! The ban's been lifted and we are back in Philadelphia. Here we come!
Oh! Flip, Philadelphia, flip, Philadelphia, flip.
Philadelphia.
Yeah!
It is our Philadelphia Week podcast. The Wings went 2-0 this weekend. The Barrage are back, and we are excited more than ever. Adam, how excited are you that the Barrage are coming back to town?
Oh, I'm so freaking excited, man. I know I talked in past pods about middle school Adam's dreams coming true to have a field team back in Philly, and I'm just really excited. 1, that they're back. 2, that they brought back the old logos. I thought don't mess with a good thing. The logo they had back in the early 2000s, I thought was just sleek, perfect, and couldn't ask for a better logo. So super excited about that. Super excited about the team potentially that's going to be. I know I was a big fan of that Atlanta Blaze squad and that offense last year. We can talk later about that a little bit more, but couldn't be more excited about that. And also started lacrosse practice today as well, officially underway for the 2020 season at Boys Latin. Couldn't be more excited for the squad we're bringing into the MIA this year. Have a bunch of awesome goalies. Missed coaching last year and excited to be back on the field. So this was a big week for me when it comes to lacrosse. Going to be more excited.
Awesome, yeah, and we'll dive in a little bit more to what the Barrage coming back to Philly kind of means for the MLL as a whole. What their roster is going to look like. Obviously, you mentioned the Blaze a little bit, and who's going to be coaching them. So we'll dive into that, but before we do, we're going to do our fast break as usual, but we are rebranding it as the fastest fast break. So without further ado, here we go.
It's time for the fastest fast break. We go to Halifax for the Hossack Bowl with brothers Graham and Matt Hossack facing off. The Rush get out to a huge 12 lead, but you can never count out Halifax. Cody Jamieson and co. come roaring back to tie at 15-15 with 30 seconds left in the game, but the Rush, on the rush, get the game winner in overtime. In Toronto, Logan Stress returns to the Warriors lineup, but he and roommate Mitch Jones were no match for Rob Hellier and The Rock as Hellier raises some hell and scores 6 goals to take down the Warriors. In Bandit Land, the Wings face their first matchup in back-to-back road games this weekend in less than 24 hours, but Coach Paul Day and company said no problem. They hold on to win in a dominant performance by Zach Higgins, 7-6. And then down in Georgia, the Swarm overwhelmed the Riptide as 10 different goal scorers score for Georgia. They get their revenge and the victory, 14-9. And then in San Diego, the Mammoth get a huge performance out of Dylan Ward as he continues to make incredible saves left and right. The Mammoth get a crucial West victory and they win 10-7. And in the final game of the weekend in New England at the Casino, the Black Wolves taking on their East rival. And the Wings get off to a hot start off of Rambo's 6 goals. Throw your socks, ladies and gentlemen, because the Wings win back-to-back games and get a crucial East victory, 14-11, over the New England Black Wolves.
All right, so that is our fastest fast break. Fastest fast break in professional lacrosse. That's our recap of our games. Hopefully it's a little bit more entertaining than the usual, so that will be the format. We also will go into our quick stick now, though, Adam. Why don't you take it away with some of the news from around the leagues?
Start off in the PLL. The league created a PLL stats Twitter account in order to take a deeper dive into the analytics of the PLL. When we saw Joe Keegan at LaxCon, he revealed a bit of what they were looking at during his presentation, and we know he was really excited to get this project off the ground. Really excited about that. We've seen a lot of good things from Joe, and this is another great thing that's coming out of the PLL. In other PLL news, their trade window has also begun. That started on Monday and will run until April 20th following the collegiate draft. We haven't seen any trades yet up to this point, but expect some news coming up in the near future. And our last bit of PLL news, Chrome attackman Jordan Wolf announced he'd be changing his number from 32 to 33 in honor of Kobe Bryant, who wore number 33 at Lower Merion, where Wolf attended high school. Wolf also asked for donations to the Kobe Bryant Foundation. So great gesture from Jordan there, from a fellow Lower Merion alum. Moving on to MLL news, the league announced that Cascade will be the exclusive helmet provider for the MLL, meaning they won't be wearing any Warrior helmets this upcoming season. We're not sure what this means for the New Balance and Warriors' involvement in the league, but with Jim Davis completely out of the MLL and this news, it seems that they won't be a sponsor going forward at this point. And finally, the MLL announced the Atlanta Blaze will not play this season, but their colors and trademarks will remain in Atlanta. And as reported, and we talked about a little bit ago, that Blaze roster will be moving to Philly, which brings us to our favorite news of the week. The Philly Barrage are back.
All right, so let's dive into this Barrage news. Obviously, we touched on it a little bit, but, a key point to this news was that the Atlanta Blaze roster will become the new Philadelphia Barrage. So we also know they will be having a supplemental draft as well in the coming months to kind of divvy out, I guess, the rest of the talent. We don't know too many details on that, but essentially the Blaze have become the Barrage, even though they consider these two different franchises. Spencer Ford, who is with the Atlanta Blaze organization, will now be head coach. He'll get his first head coach stint. He played in the MLL for a few seasons, but injuries kind of derailed his career early on. But he's been with the league really since its inception, whether it be as a player or as an executive. But this is his first head coaching stint, so we know he's really excited. We're actually going to have him on the podcast in a week or two, so that'll be exciting to kind of talk to him about that. But again, Adam, you mentioned the logo's back, the colors are back. I mean, how excited are you to kind of see Philadelphia get its professional field lacrosse team back?
It's been a long time coming. I've been talking about the interest in a team coming back to Philly for a while. We've seen the Wings come back and have immediate success from a fan standpoint. So I think it's important for the league to be in a hotbed like Philly, and I couldn't think of a better spot for them to be. I am curious. We haven't heard the announcement of where they will be playing. So depending on where they play really will sway my opinion one way or the other. Obviously, I couldn't be more excited that they are back, obviously, but I am curious where that home will be, whether it's at Villanova, where they played in their previous stint in Philly. Jokingly enough, that's at the Temple basketball game the other day when they played Nova. The Temple fans denoted all the places that are closer to Philadelphia than Villanova. So curious to see if they're going back to Nova. People have been throwing out Franklin Field, where Penn is, as a potential option. And there are obviously a ton of other potential places as well. When it comes to collegiate facilities in Delco, where I'm from, I can think of a handful potentially that you could see a squad filling up a team, filling up a stadium or venue on a weekly basis potentially. So just really excited to have a team back in the Philly area for the first time in 10 years. I know we try and be impartial on this pod, but I'm going to have a little bit of an allegiance when it comes to next MLL season. I'm going to be honest with you. But speaking of kind of from the context of the MLL, what are your thoughts on this move for the league in general?
I think it's smart. I mean, Philadelphia is a huge hotbed for lacrosse. I've heard a lot of people saying, oh, well, they might as well call it the Northeast Lacrosse League, now that they're kind of centralizing all the teams in the Northeast besides the Denver Outlaws. But I think it's smart for the MLL's growth. You have to look at it, they're trying to consolidate into these hotbeds. Connecticut is also a fairly good lacrosse market, and they're trying to do that because attendance in Atlanta was poor, attendance in Dallas was poor, and right now they need to lean heavily on these hotbeds where there are a majority of lacrosse fans. So the MLL needs to really just batten down the hatches and get into cities that they know they can be successful and build these local fan bases, partner with local leagues. It's obviously a shame that they've moved out of markets like Ohio, Atlanta, Dallas, markets that have potential. But I think as long as they kind of regroup and maybe refocus, they could return to those markets. They've consolidated into a single entity that gives them a little bit more control. They didn't leave Denver, which I think would have been a mistake because Denver, again, to me is a hotbed, whereas an Atlanta or a Dallas or in Ohio. Those are big lacrosse areas, but they're still not established enough, I think, for the MLL right now. So I guess that's kind of where I'm at with it. I like that they're consolidating it. Also because, to be honest, the PLL has more of the big name players. And it's not just a talent thing either. They just have more recognizable players that have been doing a better job of building those brands. So the MLO needs to really lean heavily on the team aspect, like that they've done with the Bayhawks. The Bayhawks are embedded in the Annapolis community. The Cannons are embedded in the Massachusetts community. The Lizards, too, are embedded in Long Island. So you kind of need to build those local loyalties a little bit stronger before you start expanding a little bit more. So I like it. I think it's a good move as a whole. But, time will tell to see. They obviously, like I said, I don't think they have the talent that the PLL does, and we don't know what the shakeup's going to be, come March when people go over to the PLL. But Dan Oresti has talked to a lot of these MLL players, a lot of them from the Northeast, and a lot of them are actually happy with the decisions the MLO has been making in consolidating the Northeast. They're going to not have to travel as much. They're going to be, closer to home. Family and friends can see them. And he said, that a few of them were considering making the jump to PLL and have decided to stay. So we don't know who exactly those players are. Even if we did, we can't really reveal, as in terms of privacy for the players. And, they obviously have contracts that they are tied to right now. But all that will come out in March. And I think, the league is in decent shape right now in terms of, competitive standpoint. But, we're excited about the Barrage. I know you posted your poster of Greg Catrano. Hopefully, the Philadelphia Barrage will send you some merchandise. They talked about sending merchandise to some OG fans. So if anyone gets any merchandise, I think you deserve it. But yeah, that's our little take on the Barrage. We're excited to have him back. We're going to get into some more Philly sports later when we talk the NLL. But before we do that, let's kind of go into the Pll Trade Window that just was announced. We have an article coming out soon where me, you, and Jordan Johnson and Dan Oresti kind of talk about what players we think need a change of scenery and what trades we could see in this window. But we'll give you a little bit of a preview of that with some of the players that we think need a change of scenery. And I'll go first with the first one to me. Obviously, Romar Dennis expressed his discontent with the Chrome last year and them not protecting him from the expansion draft. He went undrafted in the expansion draft, so he returns to the Chrome. But, he talked about maybe asking for a trade if he was to return. So we don't know if that's still his plan right now. But I think he's a guy that needs a change of scenery. He played in every game last year, but, really wasn't that productive. Didn't see a lot of, time, too, as we went down the stretch, despite, the Chrome being in last place. He really had nothing to lose. So he's a guy I think needs a change of scenery. I would love if the Chaos traded for him. And, I think Romar Dennis is a pretty high caliber player. So I think the Chrome would really want something in return. And, right now the Chaos are pretty loaded at attack. I thought Miles Thompson meshed really well with that attack group. Obviously, he's an Albany guy, and you got Connor Fields there. But I wouldn't be surprised if they were willing to part ways with him. They did leave him unprotected in this expansion draft. And I would like to see maybe, Chaos trade for Romar Dennis, add a little bit of midfield depth, kind of replace the, Kyle McClancy that they lost in the draft, and, give away Miles Thompson to the Chrome, who, could really add that extra element to a Gutter Ding and Jordan Wolf attack.
Yeah, absolutely. I could definitely see that happening, especially if we do see the likes of a Curtis Dixon and Austin Stotz, who are currently on that Chaos roster. They have opportunities to move on, whether that is Miles Thompson or another guy to add in a studly midfielder like Romar.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then another guy that I think, could really use a change of scenery, and I really was pushing for him to, maybe get a trade last year, before the deadline, is Chris Cloutier. I think he's a really talented player. He obviously excels with the Bandits in the NLL, and I think he showed some really good signs last year as well. He's a pro caliber guy, but he really just didn't mesh well with this attack on the Atlas. And right now, no one's hurting for attackmen more than the Whipsnakes. They were robbed of Ben Reeves, Connor Kelly, and Ryan Drenner in this expansion draft, so they are hurting for attackmen. Right now, they'll only be returning Matt Rambo as a starting attackman. I think they got guys on the roster that can really step up, like a Dylan Maltz per se, but I would really like them to trade for Chris Cloutier. And in return, I would do a 3-team deal. So the Whipsnakes would get Chris Cloutier. The Whips would instead give up James Barclay because they are loaded right now on the defensive side. And Barclay instead would go to the Chaos along with a 3rd-round pick. So the Chaos could really bolster that defense after losing Brody Merrill. James Barclay would be reunited with one of his Providence teammates in Jared Newman. And in return, the Chaos would send Curtis Dixon to the Atlas. He's talked about how he's excited to play this summer. Hopefully he'll be healthy going into this season. And I think his style fits much better with Eric Law and Ryan Brown than Chris Cloutier's did. So I would like to see him added, provide a little bit of veteran leadership too to that Atlas attack. And I think that would be the 3-player trade I would do. But regardless, I think Chris Cloutier is a guy that could really benefit from a change of scenery. As I mentioned, if the Whipsnakes do get him, he would be reunited with his teammate Matt Rambo on the wings, which he was with for a few months before they traded him to Buffalo. So I think that could, work really well if all the teams involved agree on that.
No, that makes complete sense. And, when I was looking at these potential PLL trades, I took a little bit of a different route. I looked at some players that maybe didn't get as much PT as they had hoped last season, and with the change of scenery, probably could make a big impact in the league. You talked about from a defensive side of things. Let's start there. Archer's Gorn Murray was an awesome player during his time at University of Maryland, was first-team All-American his junior year, but didn't really get too much playing time, only appeared in 3 games for the Archers last year. And, we talked to Coach Copeland about that Water Dog squad, and he mentioned on the pod that they're looking for some defense. And what better option would there be to get a guy like Gorn Murray, who not only proved it in college, but proved it during his time in the MLL as well. And I think he would be a fantastic addition to that new Water Dog squad and get him back in the game. Another one I was thinking of on the defensive side of the ball was Jack Kelly. He was my pick when we were talking about expansion for the Water Dogs, but I decided to send him to the Chrome. I think he would be a fantastic addition to that Chrome squad, who has John Galloway currently in cage for them, but I don't know how much longer Galloway will be suiting it up. He's still playing at a strong level, but his coaching career seems to be taking precedent at Jacksonville. And, Kelly and Galloway were the tandem that went to Israel and won that gold medal, albeit Jack Kelly getting injured in that tournament. But they have that connection from the U.S. side things. And depending on what Galloway wants to do going forward, Kelly could be a fantastic option to take over that Hallman cage once Galloway retires.
Yeah, no, and maybe you send Romar Dennis to the Redwoods, and or you could trade some draft picks too, with the Chrome. They'll be drafting second in rounds 2, 3, and 4, so they have some valuable draft picks to kind of give up if they decide to trade for Jack Kelly. I don't know if the Redwoods necessarily need Romar. They're kind of solid right now at the midfield, but it wouldn't hurt to add a guy like Romar Dennis to the midfield if they decide to do that and trade for Jack Kelly. And they obviously got Gunnar Walt too as another backup, so they really don't need 3 goaltenders. So I think they could really use him as some trade bait right now, where his market is pretty hot.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing. We always thought when we talk about NFL, we talk about the quarterback situation. I think PLL going forward, we're going to talk about the goalie situation, right? What are the best options for backups? You need a strong backup, or you need a fantastic tandem like they do with the Archers and Adam Gittleman and Drew Adams. So we'll see what happens going forward. But I think Jack Kelly was strong enough to be one of the 2 goalies selected for the U.S. national team, was an All-American at Brown. He has the capabilities of playing in this league. And I honestly do think he probably would have been the starter last year if he hadn't, for the Redwoods, if he hadn't had that injury. Lucky for the Redwoods, Timmy Troutner came out and played out of his mind, and it's his position to lose. But I think Kelly's good enough to play in this league, and I think someone's going to give him a chance eventually.
Yeah, so those are our trade ideas, and those are some players we think could use a change of scenery. We'll have more in our article coming out later this week so be on the lookout for that. But that concludes this segment of our podcast. We're going to take a quick break, hear a word from our sponsor, and then we'll go into our NLL game recaps.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of the Pro Lacrosse Talk podcast. We've been using Anchor for our podcast since the very start. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place, and better yet, it's free. They allow you to easily record and edit your podcast so it sounds great and send it out to all the major networks such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and many more. Better yet, they connect you with advertisers so you can start making money from your podcast right away. So if you're interested in starting a podcast, download the Anchor app today or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Today's show is being brought to you in part by Stitcher Premium. You can use Stitcher Premium to listen to shows ad-free such as Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, My Favorite Murder, Wolverine the Lost Trail, or our favorite, The Fantasy Footballers. For only $4.99 a month or $34.99 a year, you get access to Stitcher Originals, bonus episodes, and comedy albums. Better yet, if you go over to Stitcher.com/premium and use the promo code lacrosse today, you can get 1 month free. So head on over to Stitcher, sign up, and get your free trial today. All right, so welcome back. Let's dive into these NLL games. We'll start off with the one that started off the weekend and might have been the best game of the year, in my opinion. The Rush taking on the Thunderbirds, a.k.a. the Hossack Bowl. Two heavyweights going at it on Military Appreciation Night. This game had everything. It was in front of an electric Halifax crowd that has really embraced the sport from the get-go. So kudos to those Halifax fans. But these teams were evenly matched in their own ways. I mean, this game was very competitive despite being a huge game of runs. You know, the Rush got out to a huge lead, with the score eventually being 12-3 in the favor of the Rush early in the third. But again, you could never count out the Thunderbirds, as they've proven all year, as Cody Jamieson and co. came roaring back in the fourth, down by a deficit of 14-7, and went on an 8-1 run to tie the game and send it to overtime with less than 30 seconds left. But their Achilles heel all game long would be their downfall. They gave up yet another transition goal to the appropriately named Rush, who won off a Mike Messenger breakaway goal. So Halifax drops its second straight loss. The Rush get a huge victory. They're really firing on all cylinders right now, the Rush. I don't think we talk about them enough. And again, these transition goals, they just really played really solid defense on Halifax, forced those turnovers, and made the most out of them. Despite the loss, Ryan Benesh for the Halifax Thunderbirds had 10 points. So, again, he's just been on a tear. But, again, the Thunderbirds' late rally that we've come to know them for, again, fell short this week. And the Rush get a big victory. So, Adam, you predicted the Rush would win in this one, and they got it done in a nail-biter. Do you think we just saw a preview of possibly the NLL Finals this year?
I definitely could see both of these squads getting that far, At this point in the season, I know that there's a lot of games left to be played, but Saskatchewan really has a hold on that Western Division at the moment. They've played 4 less games than Colorado, who currently is 5-6. So as long as they don't lose all of those, they're holding steady at that top of the Western Division. I definitely see them at this point as a playoff team and an absolute contender for the championship going forward. Halifax, I think they are still one of the top 2 teams in the NLL. Despite the loss, it's so impressive that they had the ability to come back and make that run in the fourth quarter, albeit coming up short. They are a fantastic squad, and I fully expect them to be there in the long term when it comes to the playoff picture and one of the top 2-3 teams in this league.
Yeah, you can just never count them out. I mean, Micah Kersey gets them, to really just, buy into the system. And if they could nix just some of these, second and third quarter slumps that they tend to have, I think they would be a lot better off. I mean, again, they're, only have 2 losses on the season.
A glaring difference between this squad currently and kind of the beginning of the season when they were clicking on all cylinders is the playing cage. I think it's important to note we thought we saw a Warren Hill that had upped his game. And he was playing absolutely lights out early in the season. Lately, he's come back to earth a little bit in his play, and I think that's something to kind of keep an eye on going forward when it comes to the longevity and the success of this Halifax roster. I think he is absolutely suited to be a part of this roster and a starter, and has the ability to propel that defense. But that's just something to look out for going forward, is his playing cage, because I think that really will determine how far this Halifax squad can go.
Yeah, no, definitely. And as we mentioned, goaltending is so crucial to a team's success. We can't understate that. Is so crucial to a team's success. We can't overstate that enough. And a team that has been getting really good goaltending, week in and week out, is the Philadelphia Wings. So let's get into the Philadelphia discussion. Again, a great week for Philly sports if you're a lacrosse fan. The Wings had back-to-back road games this weekend with less than 24-hour turnaround. Coach Paul Day and company still said, no problem. They go into Banditland and hold on to win 7-6 in a really hard-fought game against the Bandits. And then they take on their East rival in the Black Wolves and get the 14-11 victory on Sunday. So what a weekend for Philadelphia sports.
Yeah, and when we talk about that first game against Buffalo, you mentioned it. Goalie Zach Higgins really came up with a gem in cage. 44 saves and only 6 goals allowed, including some big saves in the fourth quarter. When we went to their home opener and chatted with some of the guys afterwards, they couldn't talk highly enough of Higgins and how his development has really been at an upward trajectory compared from last season to this. Paul Day could not talk highly enough of the development of his starting goaltender. And like we said, goaltending is such an important position, and some weren't sure about Higgins coming into the season. He's really shown that he is one of the top netminders in the world.
Yeah, I think, too, that this team has really bought in to playing team defense in front of Higgins, too. They're just really dominating their one-on-one matchups, playing solid in front of him. We saw in the first half of the Black Wolves game, they only allowed 1 settled goal, and the rest were on transition. So if they, were able to nix those transition opportunities, they would have been, even off to an even bigger win against the Black Wolves. And they play, a hard-nosed style where they aren't afraid to be physical. It's guys like Steph Charbonneau who may not make much of a dent, in the goal column, but do the intangibles like playing lockdown defense and getting loose balls that really make a difference, on this team. And Matt Rambo had a breakout weekend. We've seen what he was able to do, especially assisting a lot of his teammates this year. But, he had quite the goal tally this weekend as well. He had 10 goals this weekend, 6 in the second game against the Black Wolves. He had a hat trick just 18 minutes into the game and would finish with the sock trick. Career high 6 goals for him. So, what a weekend for Rambo. And the Wings were just efficient on the power play. They went 4 for 6 on the power play this weekend, and more importantly, they've been holding their opponents. They allowed just 2 goals in 6 shorthanded situations this weekend, and even got a shorthanded goal themselves against New England. So, I can't emphasize enough how much this team has bought in to Coach Day's philosophy and playing solid team defense, being physical, and really outmatching your opponents on those loose balls. So I don't know, what else have you seen from this team? And do you think they could really be a contender and make a run to the NLL Finals this year?
I don't see why not. The progression of this team from last year to this year is pretty exemplary. And, Coach Day talked about before the season how close they were last year in those games that they lost by a goal or two. And those games for a young squad didn't go their way last year. But with that experience, with the improvement of players like Higgins and the aforementioned Rambo, like we talked about, their development continues to increase, and the play of guys like Trevor Baptiste and then the guys that they brought back from injury. I fully expect them to be in the running the whole way. Are they my odds-on favorite at this point in the season? Probably not. But if they continue to play the way they are, they're the first team to 7 wins on the season, albeit them playing 10 games already. They have a spot at the top of that division right now, and they have a couple games up where a team like Georgia, who has played 2 less games, and a team like New England, who has played 3 less games, they have to win all of those games to even up with the Wings at the top of the standings right now. So they're looking strong to make the playoffs and make a strong run once they get there.
Yeah, no, definitely. It was a big weekend for the Wings, getting those 2 road victories, and now sitting at the top of the East standings. And then along, with the Philadelphia Barrage news, it made for a really great week for Philadelphia sports fans. But some other notable results from around the league we didn't mention yet. The Mammoth get the win over the Seals. Dylan Ward had another gem, this time getting the win and snatching another soul with one of his miraculous saves. We talked about how we were worried for the Mammoth last week. I wouldn't say that they're out of the woods just yet, but they moved up the West standings thanks to their win as well as a loss from Vancouver. And speaking of Vancouver's loss, the Warriors got Logan Schuss back from injury, but it wasn't enough as the Rock go on a 6-goal run starting in the second quarter, never really looked back on their way to a 14-7 victory. And then finally, another game from around the league was the Swarm getting revenge against the Riptide 14-9. The Riptide got down early 9-2 and could never really kind of recover from that. It was a fairly balanced attack from the Swarm with 10 different goal scorers for Georgia. One of those was not Shane Jackson this week. His hat-trick streak comes to an end this week, but he still had 6 assists, so I think he's doing just fine. But those are your results from around the league. Those are our game recaps. So now let's dive into the top fantasy lacrosse performers from the weekend. Some of the top performers you had in cage was Dylan Ward. We mentioned 52 saves. He had an assist and a loose ball as well, and only allowed single-digit goals for his 8th game of the season, so he had 12.5 points. And then at forward, you had Ryan Benesh at 12.25 points, and Rob Hellier and Shane Jackson each with 9 points to lead the forwards. On defense in transition, it was Challen Rogers who had 6.75 points, and Steve Priolo who had 6 points that led defensive in transition players. So if you started either of those captains, you were sitting pretty good. And then, of course, last week, Adam, you had Ben McIntosh as your Epic Lacrosse Fantasy Lock. He got you 4 goals and 4.75 points. So not a huge day, but, still a solid pick. And then I had Shane Jackson, who got me 9 points off of his 6 assists. I predicted he would get another hat trick, which didn't happen, but he still got me a lot of fantasy lacrosse points. So now heading into this week, Adam, who is your Epic Lacrosse Fantasy Lock?
I'm going to be going with the Thunderbirds' Clark Peterson. They have a huge game, battle for first place against the Rock this coming weekend. Peterson's a native of Toronto, so I expect him come up big from an offensive standpoint for Halifax against his hometown squad. So I'm going to take Clark Peterson.
All right, and with my pick, I'm going to take Randy Stotz. He is tied for first on the Swarm with 29 assists. So, he continues to dish out apples on the offensive side of the ball. I think he's going to get another high assist total this weekend, maybe a few goals sprinkled in there and a few loose balls. So he's my Epic Lacrosse Fantasy Lock.
Lock it down.
All right, so those are this week's Epic Lacrosse Fantasy Locks. Let us know your lock by tweeting us your pick and using the hashtag Epic Lacrosse Fantasy Lock. With that, we will take a quick break, hear a word from our sponsor, and then we'll go into our Pro Lax Throwback Moment of the Week. Today's show is being brought to you in part by Stitcher Premium. You can use Stitcher Premium to listen to shows ad-free such as Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, My Favorite Murder, Wolverine the Lost Trail, or our favorite, The Fantasy Footballers. For only $4.99 a month or $34.99 a year, you get access to Stitcher Originals, bonus episodes, and comedy albums. Better yet, if you go over to Stitcher.com/premium and use the promo code LACROSSE today, you can get 1 month free. So head on over to Stitcher, sign up, and get your free trial today. All right, so welcome back. We have an edition of our Pro Lax Throwbacks this week, and again, since the Barrage are returning, we are honoring the Philadelphia Barrage. We're going to take a look at Roy Colsey's 10-point performance in the 2006 MLL Championship. In one of the more brilliant individual performances we've seen in playoff history, Roy Colsey tallied a dazzling 10 points, which were 6 goals, including 2 two-pointers and 2 assists, en route to a 23-12 Barrage victory over the Outlaws and a second MLL title for the team. Colsey was named the 2006 MLL Championship MVP as well in this game. So overall, just a phenomenal performance by him. So let's take a listen to some of the calls from those goals.
High heat from Roy Colsey. A wicked release for 2 more. That's Roy Colsey. Boyle on the quick feed, and it's Colsey.
points, and they are well on their way in the summer of 2006 to claiming that Major League Lacrosse Championship trophy.
It's a heavy little
much
guy.
better.
There it is.
Yes!
I don't know what to do.
Second one's sweeter, boys. The second one is sweeter.
What a performance by Roy Colsey. Adam, you watched the game as a kid and as a Philadelphia Barrage fan. What was it like watching his performance?
Yeah, it was pretty stunning. He was a fantastic player. We were really lucky for him to stick around once the Barrage moved from Bridgeport. This was a big battle coming into this one. It was clearly the two best teams in the league pretty much from the get-go. Both squads ended up being 10-2 that year. We're head and shoulders above the rest of the league. Handled both of their semifinals pretty easily. So it was, to be honest with you, a pretty surprising outcome. To say the least. Obviously, I was pretty excited with the outcome in 2006. And not only was this a studly game from Roy Colsey, which we saw a huge game as well from Brian Doherty in cage for that Barrage squad. So great throwback, bringing back some awesome memories from that time point in pro lacrosse. So couldn't pick a better one, especially for timing wise.
Yeah, no, definitely. So that's kind of why we picked it. That's your, Pro Lax Throwbacks moment of the week. You guys can check out the video of those highlight goals, on our social media. So feel free to do that. If you haven't already, dig deep into some of this Philadelphia Barrage history. They're considered one of the best dynasties to ever, play in pro lacrosse, winning those 3 championships in 4 years in the early 2000s. So can't recommend doing a deep dive into Philadelphia Barrage history enough. But with that wraps up our Pro Lax Throwback segment. Our final segment of the podcast is the pick and roll. We have 5 competitive games this week. These were really tough for me to pick when I was looking at them at first. But let's dive right into them, Adam. Our first game of the weekend is the Toronto Rock taking on the Halifax Thunderbirds. Who do you like in this one?
Yeah, there are some fantastic games this weekend coming up with real playoff implications coming down the line. This is a big one, a battle for first place overall in that North Division. Tough one, I think, as well as the Rock played last week. I just don't see this Thunderbird squad losing 3 straight. I take Thunderbirds in this one. I mentioned Clark Peterson having a big day. I think that offense is going to ball out, and I think Warren Hill's going to come up in cage and get the W for the Thunderbirds.
All right, I'm going to go Thunderbirds as well. I think Ryan Benesh is going to continue his, scoring tear that he's on. The Rock did knock off Halifax 2 weeks ago, handed them their first loss, but it's tough to beat teams, multiple times, especially within 3 weeks. I think Thunderbirds are going to be prepared. I think they're going to go in Toronto and they're going to steal a win. It's going to be a close one for sure, though. And then going off of that, we have another huge matchup between the Saskatchewan Rush and the Philadelphia Wings. Adam, who do you like in this one?
Yeah, this is another fantastic matchup. I'm going to ride the hot hand. I know it's crazy to think the Rush aren't the hot hand in this one, but I was 2-0, got close to you in the standings because of those 2 Wings victories. I'm riding the Philly high, sticking with Wings.
All right, I'm going Rush. It was tough for me because, the Wings are back at home. They've been playing really, really well too. But I think their transition defense is going to hurt them a little in this one. We saw, this matchup, I think, is going to be tough for both teams. I think the Rush are going to really take it to them on transition. But I think the Rush are going to, put a lot of these transition goals home, pepper Higgins a little bit more than he's used to. And I think Mark Matthews' squad comes away with a victory in Philadelphia. And then following that game, we have the Nighthawks heading to New England to take on the Black Wolves. Who do you like in this one, Adam?
Despite their record at this point, I'm excited to see what the Nighthawks have in store. Coming off a tough loss to a Warriors squad where they thought they really had it in the bag with that last 30 seconds and that play within the last 30 seconds. And if it wasn't for Mitch Jones, I think they may have doubled their win total for the season. I think this is a trap game for a Wolves squad who needs a victory. I'm taking Nighthawks in this one. Sean Evans going to have a big day, and I think they've come out of New England with a rare victory.
All right, I think this is going to be a shootout. Again, though, I think New England has more depth than the Rochester Nighthawks do. I think Doug Jamieson is going to have a better game than he has in the past couple weeks. So I'm going to go, with Callan Crawford and Doug Jamieson and the Black Wolves to get the victory against the Nighthawks. And then following that game, we have the Warriors taking on the Seals in San Diego. This game was originally going to be the Rumble at the Runway. It was rescheduled, unfortunately, because of the issue with the military base that they were going to play at. They were dealing with the coronavirus, so they had to change the venue for that. This one was tough for me to kind of decide. So I'll go first on this one, though. I think the Seals are going to get a huge victory against the Warriors and keep this West Division interesting. Right now, the Seals are sitting at the bottom, and the Warriors are, right ahead of them. There's so much parity in this West Division, but I think San Diego matches up against Vancouver really, really well, and I think, with the return of Austin Stotz and Casey Jackson, they're going to get the victory in this one.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that one. I think the big difference between the squad now and the last time they played is the play of Austin Stotz. Add that into the mix, and I foresee a victory for the Seals as well, especially albeit at home.
All right, and then the final game of the weekend, the Roughnecks finally get back on the schedule, and they are taking on the Georgia Swarm in Georgia. Adam, who do you like in this one?
I'm going to take the Swarm in this one. They have to continue to play well to stay near the top of that East Division. It's a home game for the Swarm. I think, like you talked about, your boy Shane Jackson has continued to play well, whether it's scoring or assisting in scoring. I think that offense is pretty potent. Roughnecks are still looking to kind of find their sea legs on the offensive side of the ball with some key missed players. I think the Swarm offense is just going to be a little bit too much for the Roughnecks.
All right, yeah, you mentioned, the Roughnecks are a little banged up, but they are getting a key guy back, and that is the captain, Dane Doby, this week. So I really think that they're going to get a big victory in Georgia. I think they're going to, stay competitive in that West Division, and I like Calgary in this one.
Wouldn't surprise me if they got the W with the captain back.
Absolutely. So those are our game picks for this week. We didn't really mention, Adam, you had a phenomenal week this week. You went 5-1. I went 2-4. So you made up a lot of ground like you said you would. I'm currently 32-19, so still ahead of you by 2, with you being 30-21 overall in the season. But yeah, you made up some ground. We're both, doing pretty well, above 500. But I definitely lost a bit of the lead that I had on you last week. But with that wraps up our podcast. We do want to tease a few things coming out. Like I said, we have our trade article that is coming out later this week. Our interview with Andy Copeland is also currently up, as well as a complimentary article by Dan Arestia talking about the tough decisions Coach Copeland had to make. So feel free to check out either the podcast or the article. We're also happy to announce we have 3 upcoming interviews, one with Pat Harbison of the Redwoods, one with Kieran McCardle of the New York Riptide and Water Dogs, and Spencer Ford, head coach of the new Philadelphia Barrage. So be on the lookout for those 3 interviews coming in the near future. And then finally, we want to welcome Jackson Hallman, who is now our graphic design contributor, joining the team. He is going to be putting out a lot of cool designs, including a new series that we're going to keep under wraps for now, but PLL fans should be pretty excited for this new series that we're doing. Jackson, is a phenomenal graphic designer. He's currently in college right now at Salisbury studying graphic design, and we're really glad to have him on our team. So that wraps up our podcast. Before we go, Adam, let's go to overtime. What are you looking forward to most this coming weekend of lacrosse?
Yeah, I think that we talked about a lot of NLL games that are going to be some barn burners, but I'm really excited to see. We mentioned it a little bit earlier, but this trade window, I fully expect some trades to go down for the PLL pretty soon. So I'm excited to see what news pops up on my feed when it comes to some future trades for our PLL players.
All right, I like that. I'm definitely interested to see what trades kind of come about, especially to see what teams decide, if they decide to load up on draft picks and maybe move away from some players, or maybe they feel like they want to make moves before the draft. But my thing that I'm really looking forward to watching, I mean, we just had Michael Sowers have a phenomenal game, 14 points in his most recent game with Princeton. He's looking like the unanimous #1 pick right now, but there are some other great prospects out there. So I'm excited to actually watch some college lacrosse this weekend and see some future draft prospects for this league. There's a lot of prospects out there. It'll definitely be cool to kind of, watch these guys play in college and kind of, predict where they might end up come this April college draft. But with that, that wraps up episode 65. Thank you guys all for listening. Please subscribe and consider leaving us a review, and we hope you tune in next time to Pro Lacrosse Talk.